Donald Trump's cuts to foreign aid have been approved by the US House of Representatives. All Democrats and 2 Republicans voted against it. It was also passed by the Senate last week. And the bill will see the US government cut billions of dollars in aid, though the final amount is less than the president proposed, after the Senate excluded a global HIV/AIDS prevention program from the cuts. USAID, which provides humanitarian assistance to developing countries around the world, is included in the cuts. And Republicans successfully argued that the funds went to programs they consider wasteful. The bill now goes to the White House, where President Trump's expected to sign it into law. Enrique Roig served as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor at the US Department of State in the Biden administration. That's the main bureau responsible for documenting human rights abuses around the world. Welcome to DW. So how are you feeling a day after Congress approves such major cuts to US foreign aid?
Well, thank you for the invitation, first of all. And in terms of how I'm feeling, it's another sad day in what's been a long 5 months when it comes to the dismantling of USAID. I think these latest cuts demonstrate a further gutting of U.S. foreign assistance, particularly when it comes to programs around humanitarian assistance, global health, the prevention of conflicts, peacekeeping, democracy and governance programs that support activists, human rights defenders, independent journalists. So I would say we're at a real low point when it comes to our soft power and our ability to conduct these programs around the world, in combination with what we saw last week, which was the firing of about 1,300 State Department officials, many of which also work on many of these programs globally.
Let's talk about this notion of the effect that this will have, because we can see why these cuts matter to countries that receive the money. You talked about US soft power. Is there any way in which you see the US itself suffering as a result of saving this money in this way?
Well, for sure. We can't just rely on, military power, for example. We've heard individuals like former Secretary of Defense Mattis say, if you don't fund the State Department, you're going to have to buy me more ammunition. And I think, unfortunately, that's what we're seeing here with the gutting of the State Department, with the gutting of U.S. foreign assistance globally. It will have an impact not only in terms of the lives that it saves, but also in terms of our own national security. Because let's remember, many of these programs also help mitigate migration to the U.S., particularly here in the Western Hemisphere. So programs that were providing support for reintegration of Venezuelan migrants in Colombia and Venezuela and Ecuador, for example, those have all been gutted. And so, we could potentially see an uptick in those populations coming up to the U.S. Similarly, in Central America, where many programs were addressing the root causes of migration as well. And, and let's look at also places like Sudan and Gaza, which also rely on life-saving humanitarian support as well as medicines and other supplies.
The Trump administration has said it wants trade, not aid. They called it this commercial diplomacy. Do you see any benefits in this approach?
Well, of course, trade is always going to be important, but let's also remember that diplomacy, foreign assistance are also part of the toolkit that the United States has always employed worldwide when it comes to our relationships with other countries. And so, unfortunately, now we've lost that ability. With it comes, a loss of capacity of lots of relationships that have been built over decades with government partners, with NGOs, civil society in many of these countries. And again, the ability to be able to support populations who are living in conflict zones where the USAID has been instrumental in providing that kind of support. And of course, the concern is that China, fills the void in those circumstances, in those situations. So, it's, I would say, frankly, an act of self-sabotage at this moment that we're seeing by the Trump administration. And, it's going to take a long time to try and rebuild any of this if that opportunity arises in the future.
So we see that you talk about China potentially filling the void. We see the EU trying to push through a 6-year mega budget involving billions of euros for foreign aid and investments. Well, again, it could be argued that maybe it is time for other countries, including China, including EU countries, it's time for them to shoulder more of the US's humanitarian burden.
Listen, of course, it's important that other countries take up that responsibility. But again, the U.S. has been a major player in this arena. And let's not forget that it's only 1% of the entire U.S. national budget, right? So in comparison, see what we spend on defense, which is now going to surpass $1 trillion with this new, big, beautiful bill that was passed by the Trump administration. For USAID over the years had been only $40 billion, but had done so much important work around the world, again, when it came to humanitarian assistance and global health programs, in particular, in many of these conflict zones.
Right. Good talking
trade,
to you.
of course, is an important component of that, but it has to be in balance with foreign assistance.
Thanks for joining us, Enrico. Enrico Roig is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary in the US Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour.